unless you've had your head buried in the sand, then you're already aware of how much trash we generate as a people and as a nation. Well, Lia Colabella has been on the front lines of fighting the fight against single-use plastics. Single-use plastics is basically that. All of the plastics that we only use one time and rarely gets recycled. So, with this podcast, I wanted to highlight what Lia has been working on. It is an exceptional project, and she throws out some statistics that are just astonishing, and not in a good way. It's just it's kind of appalling in the amount of trash that we just dump everywhere. So with this, she's been working with Costa, with the Kick Plastic campaign, and I urge everybody to follow this campaign. I think it's just a rock star project, and I really hope you enjoy this show. With that, thank you for joining this episode of the Primitive Republic. We're here at Poma in Wichita, Kansas, right in front of proud sponsor of Poma, Nissan's uh, specialty truck that they've got here for beach agencies and stuff like that. And I am speaking with Lia Colabella with the Kick Plastic campaign. She's a Kick Plastic ambassador for Costa, right?
Yep.
And I wanted to talk about this. Obviously, anybody who is a follower of my podcast, follower of my media, anything like that, they know that I'm like on fire for conservation and stuff like that. And if we don't take care of our land, then we're not going to have any. I mean, it's just we're not going to have the animals. We're not going to be able to enjoy nature, none of that. So it only takes one person to ruin it for everybody, and right now we're ruining it for ourselves. So without further ado, if you want to get into your background and then go into explaining what it is that you do and your whole spiel, I think everybody would be happy to listen.
Well, thanks so much for including me in your podcast. It's phenomenal. And yes, we are sitting in front of a rad Nissan truck that I think everyone here wants.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sweet setup. But my background is I'm originally from Hawaii, born and raised, right next to the ocean. My family spent a lot of time in the ocean. So it was very near and dear to my heart. And I left Hawaii, to go to college on the mainland and spent some time tracking around the world. I worked actually in international sports for a long time. And I ended up sort of missing a little. There was a piece of me that wasn't being rewarded by my work in international sports, and that was the ocean loving piece. So I got into ocean conservation, and I spent a lot of time traveling all around the world. And there was this rise of this insidious plastic trash on all these beaches and at river mouths everywhere that we were going. And I joined an organization, a nonprofit organization called the Five Gyres Institute, run by Marcus Erickson, the veteran that we were speaking about earlier, and his wife, Anna Cummins. And they are one of the premier researchers of this issue, really caught it early and needed that data to demonstrate that there is an increasing amount of plastic entering into our oceans. So with that in mind, Costa Sunglasses launched their Kick Plastic campaign in 2015 because, they are this amazing purpose-driven brand that has been on the lookout to protect the watery world by really supporting a lot of organizations. And they also have their own campaigns, and they launched Kick Plastic really as a way to reflect upon how are we using plastic within our operations, supply chain, products, packaging, shipping, and what can we do to make a change. And then it was like, wow, how can we engage our communities to kick plastic with us too?
Right.
So as I gave the presentation this morning at POMA and kind of started off with, kick plastic is this idea like we have a bad habit, let's kick it, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so the problem is essentially we all use, combined millions of tons of single-use plastic, right? And it goes to either landfill or in some very remote cases it gets incinerated. But way too often it escapes into the environment that we're all on the front lines of, just
Right.
really being out in the wilderness or in the oceans or in the forests and the mountains, and we're seeing it everywhere.
Oh, it's nuts. And I had told you earlier about a hunt that I had gone on.
Hmm.
It was actually in March of this year, and I was a couple miles in, and like no roads around anywhere. A couple miles in, and I'm seeing a place on public land where there's just tires and old vehicles that are in plastic bottles and trash bags and I mean you name it. This place was it looked like a landfill, and it was not. It was not well, at least it was not meant to be, even though it was being treated that way. And I did a video about it and was just like appalled. So when you brought this up at Poma, I was like, man, I've got to have her on, because that is exactly pretty much what I was echoing in the video that I was doing. I had 80 pounds on my back and everything
Hmm.
like that, and I'm doing a selfie and like scanning around so everybody could see, and it's just trash everywhere. And so, yeah, I'm really glad you came on to talk about this.
Yeah, and as I outlined a little bit ago, this is the idea of sort of take, make, waste, this sort of what we call a linear economy is fairly new. Our grandparents were, part of the war effort was to save like their chewing gum as kids, the chewing gum wrappers, that were aluminum, and put it back into the war effort, right? Because resources were so scarce. And plastic was really being used only by a couple of industries, including the military, to help, like, instead of silk parachutes,
Yep.
now we have this new technology called nylon. The parachutes were all nylon, and it's plastic is this really amazing material that has improved humanity in so many ways, right? Can you
Oh, yeah,
imagine a life without
absolutely.
plastic? But what happened in the 1950s was then plastic got turned on to the consumer market, and this idea of single-use plastic. You don't have to ever wash anything ever again. You just eat and toss your plate or your
Right.
fork. Or these are the kinds of plastics that we're highly concerned about because they're the ones that are more prone to escaping into the environment. So disposable plastic, plastic packaging, the stuff that you really use just for a short amount of time, that's the stuff that we want to look at to redesign or look at how do we use it in a way that will come back again. So instead of looking at plastic at the end of its life, that the first life that we have given it, how do we bring it back into like a circular system and put it back into the economy again
Right.
instead of a landfill? Oops, sorry,
No, no, you're
just
good.
adjusted my mic. So that is where Costa sort of said, well, we now are working on it. We call it our Homefront campaign, how we look at it internally. And now how do we engage our communities? So would you like to hear a little bit of the stats
Yeah,
around
yeah,
plastic
no,
pollution?
absolutely. I
Okay.
would love to. I'd love to.
Is-
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, no.
okay.
It's great.
All right.
Yeah.
So this idea of data, we needed data to understand how much plastic was out there, and marine scientists were inadvertently tracking it since the 70s, and the scope was just immense today. And you can just, plot it going straight up on a graph pretty much. So right now we're looking at about 8 million tons of plastic is entering into the ocean every year. That's an estimate. I mean, yeah,
Wow.
and that's on the low end. It could
That's
be even higher, and that equates to about a garbage truck a minute of plastic is being dumped into the ocean. A garbage truck a minute.
that's unbelievable.
And it's coming from all over the world, right? And it's not clearly intentionally being dumped into the ocean. That's
In
people
most cases,
in most
probably.
cases,
Yeah.
it's not. That's not where it is. But what it does is it makes its way in through watersheds,
Right.
especially in areas where they don't have like the garbage truck coming down the street to collect their trash or recycling or that sort of thing. It's just a product that was put into the single-use plastic is put into consumer hands, and a lot of times, like, we just don't know what to do with it, right? And so it escapes often into the environment, and it makes its way. The wind will blow it into the nearest watershed, and once it's in the water, then it journeys through to the ocean. So one of the first things that all of us can do to sort of stop it from getting there is like pick it up. If you see it in
Yeah.
the street, if you see it on, a trail, see it on the beach, you're sort of the last line of defense.
Right.
You can stop
And
that
it seems so
from getting into
simple,
the
right?
ocean. Right. So that's like, one of the first things you can do. Obviously, we can get into others like use
Yeah.
reusables and things like that. But once plastic makes its way out into the ocean, the powers of water and sunlight and animals will start eating at it. So like a plastic bottle or a bag, it can degrade fragment into tiny, tiny pieces of what we call microplastics, smaller than a grain of rice. And so when you're out there, people talk about, oh, those big gyres out there of plastic that are twice the size of Texas, and it's an island that we can just go clean up. That's simply just not true. Where you can clean it up are beaches and things like that.
Right.
And from like rivers and banks and things like that. Where we need to stop it though is upstream. Once it's downstream, it's too late. It's out there.
Yeah.
And it's been found in places like the Marianas Trench, the deepest parts of
Wow.
the ocean. It's been found in the Arctic. It's in the air. It's on trees. It's just that you can't see it. Just tiny little pieces are everywhere, including in the fish and shellfish that we eat. And so there's new science out there that's saying we're just eating copious amounts of plastic. We're ingesting
Right.
it. And then the next wave of science is, well, what does that mean medically? Right?
Right.
Right? So we're seeing impacts on marine life. So over 700 marine species are impacted by plastic pollution through ingestion and entanglement. And you've probably heard stories about whales washing up with, dead with just their
Right.
bellies full of plastic, right? And it's not just marine life that's affected. I mean, I hear about cattle in West Texas that are dying because they're eating plastic bags that are just drifting across their grazing land.
Well, and waterfowl, and and there's tons of waterfowl hunters and stuff like that, and deer and elk hunters, and I mean it plastic is all over. I've seen it in so many, like way back in the back country. I've seen beer cans and
Mhm.
just stuff like that. So I mean that stuff is everywhere.
Right. And so therein lies the challenge, which is the part where I really enjoy like working, right? So how do we create an entire design change shift? How do we look at this material that right now everyone uses once? I mean, I use it, right?
Yeah.
Everyone uses plastic, and we all use single-use plastic. It's in all the packaging. Like you can't go into a grocery store and just not be inundated by this disposable packaging lifestyle that we live in. So corporations are actually stepping up to the challenge, and consumers are signaling to them that, look, we don't want all this plastic everywhere, this disposable plastic, and we see that there's all this value in plastic, but are we really using plastic in the highest and best use through packaging? And the holy grail, I call it the holy grail, right? It's, there's a lot of technology development going into compostable, PLA, corn-based plastics that need an industrial composter to actually break down. Or are there biodegradable plastics out there? Those are still very nascent technologies. They're not on the market yet. But all of those plastics, unless they hit a marine degradable level, which means when it enters into a watery environment, which is usually cold, that they will break down. And that is that's still very elusive, I guess, the researchers and scientists
Right,
who
and
invented it.
like you said, though, the problem still is the plastic is still there. It's still, floating in small particles and stuff like that in the water, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want those people that are like, oh, we don't have a problem, and all that kind of thing. Oh, well, we just clean it up, or it degrades when it gets in the ocean anyway. So I don't want those kind of people to be like, oh, well, it just degrades and goes away, because it doesn't go away.
It's
It's
there.
still there.
Well, that was the magical part about plastic, right? It is very challenging to break down. Those polymer bonds are so strong, but they will fragment. And you might see it like a plastic bag that gets tattered and things
Yeah.
like that. Those are almost immediate reactions when you leave a bottle or bag out in the sun, right? So now fish are looking at plastic like, oh, yummy, tasty, like turtles.
Right.
Think of them as like jellyfish,
It's
and
just an instinctual
little,
thing.
little tiny pieces of plastic look like eggs, and salmon are eating that. It's really challenging, and then also all kinds of animals are ingesting it. But there are things that we can do, right? So first of all is sort of, it's a new challenge about like the 3 R's. Remember, like reduce,
Mm-hmm.
reuse, recycle. Like that is expanding. You can, but it really is. The first one is actually refuse.
Okay.
Refuse single-use plastic as you can, and you can do that. Like maybe you go get takeout and stuff like that. Well, instead of
Right.
maybe doing takeout, try to dine in. Like let's
Right.
get back to our roots and sit down and have a meal, right? On plates that are reusable, right? Because
Yeah.
you can
Absolutely.
wash china plates, like
China,
like
glass,
glass
stuff like
plate. Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Porcelain plates, right? Does that what I mean?
Carry around a Yeti.
Yeah, yeah. Or a Bavanda.
Yeah,
These guys
Bavanda.
from
Yeah.
Bavanda donated these awesome kick plastic water bottles to the Professional Outdoor Media Association annual conference. So they're from Lancaster
Right.
County,
Right.
Pennsylvania, some firefighters
Yeah.
from the heartland that just decided, you know what, we want to start a hydration company, and they did, and they're part of the Poma crew.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so that's
Yep.
cool. They're amazing guys. But like, yeah, carry around your reusable. If you're into, drinking smoothies and things like that, you can bring your own straw, and you can bring your own utensils, and it might take a moment to like be like, that's odd for my
Yeah. That's
lifestyle,
weird. Yeah.
but you know what? It takes a leader to just carve the path. And so we talked about how each one of us can be a sphere of influence. Like we're all influencers within our communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the lead and say, you know what, I am never going to buy a single-use plastic water bottle again, or I'm bringing this around with me everywhere I go, like that's a step and a signal to your friends and your community that you're concerned about this situation. You know that you can do things to bring it back home. So that's so we got refuse, reuse, um, reduce is another one, right?
Right.
Try to buy in bulk, instead
Mm-hmm.
of just one-off packs. That's one other way. And then one of sort of down the chain is recycle.
Right.
And you might have heard that the recycling systems in the US and actually globally are in real danger,
Right.
because we used to actually offshore our recycling to China. And China, at the start of this year, put down a policy that said, please do not send, well, not even please,
Yeah.
do not send your recycling to us. So now we have recycling, just our recycling, that because we're still kind of putting things in our single stream recycling in our community. And it's just either sitting outside of ports waiting for someone to make a decision on what to do with it, or I have heard communities are now starting to landfill it, which is incredibly disheartening, and we should all be like clamoring for some kind of action to take
Right.
place.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
and this is where corporations can step in by actually using the plastic that we recycled and bringing it back into their products. So making products out of post-consumer recycled plastic.
Right. So
Let's do it.
how did Costa fall in? Because you're an ambassador for Costa as well, right?
Yes, I am. So Costa and I crossed paths in 2015 when they launched Kick Plastic, because they were doing their homework, right? We're like, we're really concerned about this issue. We need to find out really what's going on and what can we do about it as a company. And that's where I met them through the Five Gyres Institute. And they asked if I would come on board as their Kick Plastic cause ambassador, and I support their campaign. So there's, again, two sides of that campaign, home front. So working with them on, like, operations and their R&D and products and their packaging, because we do a care and repair. Like if your Costa frames get damaged, you can send them back and they'll repair them, right? So that's part of that whole, like, the reduce, reuse, recycle, repair, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Refuse, that sort of thing. So Costa's doing that, really stepped up the level of engagement with their consumers on that issue. And then we launched this amazing collection called the Untangled Collection. And it is a completely recyclable pair of sunglasses where the frames are made from fishing nets sourced from South America. So normally in these villages, these fishing villages, they use a nylon fishing net. And if it gets holes in it and becomes aged, and they would actually, in the past, historically, would cut them adrift at sea. And then they become ghost nets, which is one of the most terrifying types of plastic pollution, because the fishing nets are designed to last forever, right? In the elements of the ocean, it's not fragmenting to tiny pieces, but it is catching things throughout, just for who knows how long. So this company called Borreo, three surfers that were trying to do something about this issue, realized that there was this challenge of all these fishing nets being cut loose at sea, and said, we're going to try to start a system to reclaim those fishing nets and turn them back into something new, a new product. So that's where Costa met them. So Costa is out there looking for innovative solutions to these major issues and supporting young entrepreneurs at the same time.
That's awesome.
So these glasses are made out of the frames, fishing nets. There's even foam padding that's made from a company called Plus Foam. It's recycled foam.
Wow.
And even the logos along the temples are made from recycled aluminum. And then, of course, glass is recyclable.
Yeah, and you'll notice I am not wearing Costas because I just found out about this morning, but I am going to go out and get a pair of Costas. But that's an absolute great cause. I really,
That's
something I can get behind. I love that.
And that's an example of the innovation that Costa's brain power is putting behind addressing this kind of issue. And then when we look at our community, like Costa has this amazing community, right? How do we activate that community? Because again, we're all seeing it every single day that we're out in nature or on the water, on the trail, like it's everywhere. So what can we do? And all the guides were coming to us saying, hey, let's get rallied up. And so we launched the Kick Plastic Guide and Outfitter program. And so the goal of that is to encourage guides to eliminate single-use plastic water bottles from their boats in the next 10 years. So we are well underway. We have partners with Yeti and Clean Canteen, and we are providing extreme discounts to those guides that sign the pledge that they're going to eliminate single-use plastic water bottles from their boats. So these guides are all over the world. And so far, as at the end of the 2018 season, we've eliminated with the guides 1.5 million single-use plastic water bottles.
Wow, that is outstanding.
And at the end of this season, we project 2.2 million single-use water bottles. And then as more guides that sign on, the bigger those numbers are going to be, the greater the impact.
Well, let's hope that your projections are low.
We're just getting started here, right?
Yeah.
And I do want to just give a shout out to the power of the guide as an influencer, because
Right.
they literally have this captive audience that they can educate about this issue. So now the audience is going back to their daily lives, and they get a Kick Plastic water bottle through
Right.
their guides, and they sort of sit there and they look at their Kick Plastic water bottle, and I've gotten emails, and I've actually talked to some of these clients that say, my time with my guide learning about the Kick Plastic program has really impacted me to make changes myself. So do you see how the movement
absolutely.
is just naturally
So,
amplifying?
Like I told you before, I'm not a guide.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a hunter that really spreads the word of conservation and stuff like that, and work with veterans and all that kind of stuff. But I want to get on board. So how do I or anybody else that wants to help with this cause, how is it that we get involved?
There's two ways. You can go to kickplastic.org, and there's a button that says, do you make your living on the water? Or in this case,
in the outdoors.
Yeah, in the outdoors, I guess. I need to change that button, I guess. And then you click on that, and it'll send you to a sign-up sheet. Or you can just email me at kickplastic@costadelmar.com. That's kickplastic@costadelmar.com.
Right. Awesome. And that's where they can find you is Kick Plastic
at costadelmar.com.
Right.
Welcome to the tribe, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to take care of it. We got to protect what we love,
Yep.
right?
Well, unfortunately, we could probably talk about this for a long time, but I think we're on the same flight, and
We are.
we've got to head out here in just a few minutes. So I wanted to take this time to talk to Lia and talk about this Kick Plastic campaign and bring some light to it, and I really, really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And, if you or any of your listeners need any resources to help support their influencers,
Or,
you need
or
tools.
statistics.
Yes.
That was something that you said earlier.
Yeah,
if
maybe
we
I
need
could
copy
send-
of statistics.
Well,
that'd be
could I give you some that you could pop on your website? Then people could
absolutely.
download those kinds of
Absolutely.
things. But the point is, there are all these resources that Costa is providing to help our entire community grow this movement, because it's going to take all of us,
Yep.
to create that ripple effect of preserving and protecting our environment for us and for future generations to love like we
Awesome.
do.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it,
It
Leah.
was absolutely my pleasure.
All right. Yep.